Let's go back for a moment to your open letter when you resigned from
Okay.
Fox, because I think that there's a lesson there that has to do with understanding each other. I understand that you got a lot of hate mail, you got a lot of people leaving you voicemails, and you decided, crazy enough, and I'm sorry to tell you this, to start calling people back.
You're not the first one to tell me
I mean,
that.
I have to tell you, it's crazy to think that somebody who leaves you an aggressive voicemail is somebody that you may want to dial their number and come back and try to get an explanation. But I know there's a story about a very particular grandma that you started, very aggressively, and you ended up spending an hour on the phone with her.
Yeah, well, I didn't start aggressively. She did. What happened was, first of all, this was back in 2016. We weren't in the climate we're in now. I didn't think of it as a dangerous thing to do. I was just so curious why people would be so offended that I chose the position I chose. Again, you could agree with me or disagree with me, but why would you care so much about something I did that you would make these calls? And some of them were violent and threatening and everything else. What's more, I ended the letter with saying, listen, you're going to keep doing the station. You're going to keep doing what you do. I just don't want to be a part of it. And here's the truth. You're not going to notice I'm gone because you'll find someone else to take my job. And nobody watching is going to notice I'm gone. I wasn't a celebrity. Nobody's going to say, hey, where is that guy? I said, but I'll know that I'm not there anymore. And that's enough for me. So I would get these calls, and I would, with cell phones, you get the phone number, you know where they called from. And I would try calling back because I just wanted to say, I'm not going to argue with you. I just want to know. I'm a marketing guy. I want to understand people. I want to know what you're so upset about. Most of the phone, nobody answered. If they did and I tell them who I was, they would hang up. But one woman said, yes, I called you. And she started really ripping into me about it. And I said, I don't understand what you're so upset about. Well, and she just started cursing me out. And I said, where am I calling you? I don't recognize this area code. And she told me. And I said, why do you live there? Are you from there? She said, no, I'm an Air Force brat. She said, my father was in the Air Force and we moved all the time. I said, oh, my father was in the Air Force too. In fact, the reason I live in Miami, my father was from New York, but when he enlisted in the Air Force, he was sent first to Pensacola and then to Miami. Miami International Airport was a military base. And my dad was sent there. And so then he went back to New York. He met my mother and they moved to Miami Beach. And that's where I was born. I said, wow, so we have that in common. We both lived somewhere because our fathers were in the Air Force. Oh, she says, what rank was your dad? All of a sudden, we're not having the conversation of this, someone who's very angry and someone who's kind of surprised. Now we're talking about a human thing. And then somehow something came up about kids. I have 2 children. She was raising her 2 grandchildren because her daughter had had a terrible drug problem and had been arrested and was going to be put in jail, and the kids were going to go into the foster program. So when she said that, I said, so I don't understand something. And don't get me wrong here. I'm not judging, but you took care of your grandchildren because you didn't want them to be separated from their family. I stepped down from the TV network because I didn't think it was right to separate children from their family. We both believe the same thing. Why are you so upset? And she said, I live on minimum wage and handouts. I can't believe you would quit such a good job. It had nothing to do with the signal. It had nothing to do with the issue. It had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that she found it offensive that I would walk away from the money that she thought I was making. She had no idea what I was making. How would she know? I didn't write it in the letter. I didn't say, and there's nowhere to look it up. For all she knew, I was volunteering every day. She had no idea. But she saw that as this kind of well-paying elite job. So whereas I thought the reason was political, it was actually my own perceived privilege, that I had the privilege to walk away from this job because I had another business. So for me, that was not a consideration. Whereas she never would get the opportunity, to your point earlier, she'd never get the opportunity to live her values because she would have needed the job. That's what she was offended by.
Wow. What does that teach anyone about disagreements? Because we live in a society that is going crazy through social media with disagreements. And unfortunately, disagreements are happening face to face in a more aggressive way. We saw what happened recently with Charlie Kirk, which was absolutely terrible and unfortunate. And how does that story teach me how to de-escalate disagreement, and how can I read beyond the words of someone to understand what you were able to understand about her and why she was upset with you?
I wasn't able to understand it until she told me. I didn't understand it going in. Just like your face opened up when I said it was my perceived privilege. In a lot of ways, I was wrong. Not because of what I did. I was wrong to assume that because she was on one side of the political spectrum, which I don't know what side of the political spectrum she's on, but I assumed she was. And I assumed that she had these feelings based on her political leanings. That wasn't true. So I was completely wrong in the way I perceived what was going on. I would say we're probably, the differences or the learning is that we're probably more alike than we're different, but I don't know if that's true or not. But I can say that in each one of these situations, we are victims to our own emotions. And more importantly, we're victims to the people who are inflaming our emotions. Because since you brought up Charlie Kirk, and I don't want to talk about him from a political point of view, nobody will argue that what happened to him wasn't heinous, un-American, horrible. And then it happened to him in front of his children, which makes it even worse. And I haven't heard any of the criticism, the famous criticism. Of course, there's idiots who say anything, but the people who have gotten in trouble for this, I haven't heard any of them who said anything other than the way he was killed was horrible, but, and remember, two things can be true at once. The way he was killed was horrible, and this person doesn't agree with what he had said. Or the way he was killed is horrible, and this person agrees with what he had said. But we don't look at it that way. As soon as one thing happens that we don't agree with, we put it all together as one point. But multiple things can be true at once. Regardless of what you think of the guy, regardless of what you think of what he did, regardless of you think of his ideology or his intentions, his murder was a heinous crime against him, his family, humanity, and the American way, because he has the right to free speech. Free speech is more important when I disagree than when I agree. But we don't think about that. We only think about the part of him that we either loved or hated, and therefore we're either pleased or offended by what happened. And that's ridiculous, but it means we're not embracing human understanding. We're just looking at what people say, and we are being victimized by the smarter, they're marketing people, I'm embarrassed to admit, who are using our own emotions to make us vote against our own best interests.